Major funding for NJ Spotlight News is provided in part by NJM Insurance Group, serving the insurance needs of residents and businesses for more than 100 years. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, and by the PSCG Foundation.
Tonight on NJ Spotlight News, term ending without a U.S. Senate confirmation hearing. New Jersey's interim U.S. Attorney Alina Habba's term will end on Tuesday. Her fate is now in the hands of New Jersey's federal judges. Plus, immigrant detention. A New Jersey military base is being tapped to imprison undocumented immigrants.
This could be sort of a jumping off point for deportation to pull people out of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York.
Also, dismantling FEMA. Experts say cuts to the country's emergency response agency will leave residents left to clean up the mess caused by intensifying storms.
To use a British term, gutted. Absolutely gutted. It was, we were so excited to finally fix this century-long issue, and to have it just pulled out from under us is very trying.
And True Grit, a summer camp for teens with spinal cord injuries, gives them a sense of independence and, more importantly, a little fun.
It's the little things that really make a big difference in my life, that even if it's just putting my shirt on or like washing my hair this week or whatever it is, just those little accomplishments mean the biggest things to us.
NJ Spotlight News begins right now.
From NJPBS Studios, this is NJ Spotlight News with Brianna Venozzi.
Hello and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Joanna Gagis, in for Brianna Venozzi. We begin with the major headlines of today. First, Alina Habba will likely not become the next U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Habba's role as interim U.S. Attorney ends on Tuesday, which marks 120 days since she was appointed by the president. That's the maximum amount of time a person in an interim position can serve. Now, President Trump did nominate Habba to the role officially, but she's never had a confirmation hearing by the U.S. Senate. And according to statute, New Jersey's U.S. District Court judges have the authority to vote in a new U.S. attorney when a position is vacant and the nomination has not been approved by the Senate. According to the New Jersey Globe, Habba has reportedly indicated she doesn't have the support of New Jersey's federal judges when they vote on Monday, but she has said that she loves her job and she hopes to stay. The federal judges are likely to choose instead between two registered Republican candidates for the position, former U.S. District Court Judge Noel Lawrence Hillman and First Assistant U.S. Attorney Desiree Grace. Also tonight, the rescissions bill passed its final hurdle to become law. The House of Representatives voted early this morning to pass the amended version of the DOJ bill that cuts $9 billion in federal funding, about $8 billion for foreign aid and $1 billion for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which includes PBS and NPR. These funds were already allocated by Congress. Kate Riley, president and CEO of America's Public Television Stations, released a statement saying the cuts will decimate public media and force many local stations to go dark, cutting off essential service to communities that rely on them. Following passage of the bill, House Speaker Mike Johnson said, "This isn't the end, it's the beginning." Public media was first created by Congress in 1967 to serve the public good and encourage development of programming that addresses the needs of unserved and underserved audiences, like children and minorities. Passage of the bill is another big win for President Trump. This is the first rescissions bill passed in more than 30 years. And U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced that New Jersey's military base, Fort McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, was chosen to temporarily house undocumented immigrants. The announcement came in a letter sent earlier this week to Congressman Herb Conaway, whose district houses the base. Hegseth's letter said that housing illegal aliens will not negatively affect military training, operations, readiness, or other military requirements, including National Guard and Reserve readiness. The announcement brought criticism from two Congress members, Conaway and Mikey Sherrill, as well as the ACLU of New Jersey, that said in a statement, expanding immigration detention to military facilities sets a dangerous precedent and is contrary to the values embedded in our Constitution. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Ben Hulak first released this story and joins us now to talk about it. Ben, great to talk to you. What can you tell us about the announcement from the Trump administration today when it comes to undocumented people being held at this New Jersey base?
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth sent a letter to members of the Armed Services Committee here in the House, notifying those members that two bases will be used temporarily to house undocumented, in his terms, illegal aliens, so that you can read that as undocumented immigrants. And one of those bases is the Joint Base McGuire, Fort Dix McGuire in South Jersey, and then there's another base in Indiana. But I talked with Herb Conaway last night, who represents, whose district includes the base, and he is just as baffled about why the base was chosen, and as the public is at this point. So there was no formal announcement. This was just a letter that went from the Pentagon to members of Congress.
There's been plenty of controversy already in New Jersey by folks who don't want to see people housed in some of the existing detention facilities that we have in the state. We know Delaney Hall was reopened for that purpose. Why end up using then a military base rather than Delaney Hall? Has the White House indicated why they're making this decision?
It has not, but I will say the administration has used military bases, or at least has eyed military bases, far from population centers to anchor, to sort of power their deportation agenda. They've eyed Fort Bliss, which is on the border, that's in Texas, is on the border with Mexico near El Paso, as one site to expand deportation. And also, really, this has dominated headlines in recent days, a site in the Everglades in Florida. So these are places away from population centers, and that's certainly the case for the Joint Base in New Jersey. It is away from the more populated North Jersey, and certainly away from Philadelphia. So Conaway's thought, as I spoke to him here off the floor last night, was that this could be sort of a jumping off point for deportation to pull people out of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York.
We know that Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, who's running for governor in the state, has a military background. She put out a statement today saying that she feels this really reduces vital national security and creates what she called political theater in a place that should be apolitical, which is a military base. Are you hearing any concern, any pushback from any of the Republican members of our congressional representation?
I am not. Chris Smith also represents the base. His district overlaps with it. It's a large, sprawling base that's, of course, been added onto over the years. Historically, decades back, it was called Fort Dix, and now the name is much longer. But no, I have not heard pushback from Republicans. This really just all emerged in the last 24 hours or so. There is a bit of a history with the base taking in refugees. In 1999, about 4,000 folks fleeing violence in Kosovo stayed there and were moved along later. And then, of course, after the withdrawal during the Biden administration, folks from Afghanistan were processed there at the Joint Base. But this is the reverse. This is 180 degrees different. So this is likely sending people abroad, not bringing them into the U.S.
Just very quickly, we know that the House did pass the rescissions bill. Along with that, there was discussion on the floor about a non-binding ordinance to release the Epstein files. Can you just give us some context around what that vote does, what it means?
Right. Democrats tried to fold this into the broader package that you mentioned last night. This was really a furious fight in a key House committee before the full chamber voted, and then on the floor. It was loud. I was in the chamber at one point, and I was too distracted. I had to leave. Both sides were just shouting about this. But this has really enraptured D.C. All week, this desire to disclose the full Epstein files, as you mentioned. And the resolution, though, to answer your question more directly, this is a flimsy resolution. It is symbolic. It is essentially worth nothing.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it there. Ben Hulak,
Just been a fun day.
Washington, D.C. reporter. To see more of Ben's reporting, you can head to our website, njspotlightnews.org. Ben, appreciate your directness as always.
Likewise, thanks.
The federal agency FEMA is known to many as the disaster relief program that funds recovery efforts after a storm, but it's also funded several projects that help communities prepare for and mitigate the impacts of flooding from storms. The Trump administration is currently working to dismantle FEMA entirely, and in the process, one New Jersey shore town has just lost a grant to prevent flooding off its main highway, Route 36. Senior correspondent Brenda Flanagan has the story.
New Jersey got another reminder this week of how quickly flash floods can strike. It dredged up bad memories for towns like Highlands on the coast, where torrential rains rose rapidly 8 years ago, blew through storm drains, and inundated the town. Flash floods often swamp Route 36, says Mayor Carolyn Brouillon.
Oftentimes, it completely closes State Highway 36, which is an evacuation route. So it's dangerous. People would be trapped in their homes with no way out, and their cars would be, the water over the dashboard.
To keep its downtown dry and its residents safe, Highlands applied for a special $13 million FEMA flood resilience grant to renovate Cavushon Field with an underground detention basin to store floodwaters and a pumping station to clear the grounds. It won all preliminary permits. But in April, FEMA tanked the entire program, leaving Brouillon,
To use a British term, gutted. Absolutely gutted. It was, we were so excited to finally fix this century-long issue, and to have it just pulled out from under us is very trying.
The president recognizes that FEMA should not exist the way that it always has been. It needs to be redeployed in a new way.
As Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem explained on Meet the Press, the new administration shifting FEMA's focus. She's actually promised to eliminate the agency. A FEMA spokesman called its flood protection grants wasteful and ineffective, more concerned with climate change than helping Americans affected by natural disasters. Any FEMA contract over $100,000 now requires Noem's personal sign-off.
And I can't think of a worse idea to do right now on the heels of a major storm in our state.
New Jersey's Attorney General Matt Plotkin this week joined a coalition of 20 states to sue the Trump administration over its decision to shut down FEMA's $4.5 billion Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant program, the one to which Highlands had applied.
The president in this country has broad powers, but he's not a king. He does not have the ability or the legal right to withhold funds that Congress, in a bipartisan way, came together and said, these funds need to be spent to do certain things. In this case, these funds need to be spent to protect us from floods, natural disasters, wildfires.
A new poll shows a majority of Americans don't want FEMA cut back. In fact, 36% want it expanded and 30% want it kept the same, compared to folks who'd cut or eliminate the agency. And 59% strongly or somewhat oppose abolishing FEMA versus 27% who'd strongly or somewhat support its demise.
We believe we should be very concerned about what's going on with FEMA at the federal level.
Amanda DeVecca-Renier co-founded New Jersey's organizing project after Superstorm Sandy. She'd love to see FEMA reformed so that the problem-plagued agency could respond faster with fewer denials and better survivor support. But following Monday's storm, as New Jersey's Office of Emergency Management fielded inspectors statewide to see whether flood damage is eligible for federal aid, DeVecca-Renier warned.
If that doesn't reach the level of federally declared disasters, we have nothing to support those people in the state of New Jersey. And it's entirely possible that we could make our own individual assistance program, and so that storm survivors could apply for that while we are struggling to reform FEMA and make it work for us.
The Murphy administration had no comment on creating a new New Jersey program, but noted the success of our state's emergency response and recovery efforts has been made possible through the strong and sustained support of our federal partners at FEMA. Simply put, New Jersey would not be as ready or as resilient today without FEMA's ongoing partnership. Meanwhile, in Highlands,
We're feisty here in Highlands. We can we find ways of doing things where you have to become used to it, because until we have a fix, you always have to have a plan.
she says they'll look for other funding sources that don't rely on federal approval. I'm Brenda Flanagan, NJ Spotlight News.
Another agency that's facing significant cuts under the president's administration is NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and in particular, a research project that was being conducted there called Atlas 15 that helped to predict future rainfall. That's an important tool for regional planners and civil engineers who are relying on decades-old data in their planning and development. Sarah Kaplan is a climate reporter for The Washington Post who first reported that the Trump administration would be delaying the release of Atlas 15. She joins us now to explain. Sarah, it's great to have you with us tonight. I want to ask you, what is Atlas 15? Can you explain the research that was going on there?
Yeah, so Atlas 15 is intended to be an updated data set of what scientists call precipitation frequency estimates. So if you've ever heard the phrase a 1 in 100-year flood, which means like a flood that's expected to happen once every, roughly 1% chance per year or once every 100 years, that comes from these NOAA data sets. And scientists have known for decades that the chance of these kinds of rainfall events is shifting because of climate change. And so Atlas 15 was going to update the precipitation frequency estimates for the whole country based on historical observations, and it was going to include an extra forward-looking data set that would tell us how those estimates could change in the future.
How would that impact regional planners, civil engineers? How would that impact their work?
Yeah, so these estimates are hugely important. If you are designing a highway, for example, and you know that it needs a culvert for water to go through during an extreme rainfall event, the size of that culvert depends on how much rainfall you think you could potentially experience. And so civil engineers will look to the NOAA data set to answer that question. If we're designing to be able to withstand a 100-year rainfall event, you want to make sure that you are using the right numbers. It's also used by floodplain managers to understand, okay, what's the area that could potentially flood during heavy rainfall, all kinds of uses.
You broke this story that there was this announcement that the project was being put on hold. What was the explanation that was given as to why?
Yeah, so part of Atlas 15 is on hold. This is the forward-looking part that takes into account climate change to tell us what precipitation could look like in the future. And officials within NOAA told me that it was intended at, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick had ordered a review of that component to make sure that it was, best serving the American people. But they didn't say how long this hold is expected to ask or why they thought it might not be serving.
You mentioned part of the project is on hold. Explain Volume 1 and Volume 2 and what is being released.
So Volume 1 is based on historical observations. So for some parts of the country, these estimates haven't been updated in like 20 years or more. And so making sure that you have, when you're sort of saying this is what could happen, has a 1% chance of happening, you want to include data from the past 20 years. And that's what Volume 1 was going to do, was sort of bring the entire country up to date based on what we know has already occurred. And then Volume 2 would have been forward-looking and saying, okay, based on how we know climate will change in the future, how could these things continue to change? And that's really important for infrastructure, because if you're building a bridge or a house or a highway, you want that to last decades, right? And within the coming decades, we know that rainfall is going to be getting more intense.
Disaster preparedness has never really been a partisan issue before. It's starting to feel like this perhaps is. Is this part of a trend that we're seeing of these types of projects being halted?
Absolutely. We have seen the Trump administration cancel or defund a lot of pretty much any research that has the phrase climate change in it. In the recent budget proposal that the administration presented to Congress, they proposed zeroing out all climate research at NOAA. And they've canceled the National Climate Assessment, which looks at how climate change is affecting the United States. So this definitely reflects, I think, the administration's it's part of a pattern of the administration kind of putting a hold on climate research.
Well, thank you so much for your perspective. Terrific reporting. Great to have you with us. Sarah Kaplan, climate reporter at the Washington Post. Thank you.
Thank you.
Summer sleepaway camp is a rite of passage for so many young people, but kids with spinal cord injuries face a whole different set of challenges that often preclude them from participating. That's where True Grit Camp comes in. On the campus of Rutgers University in New Brunswick, Camp Grit offers more than just activities, it offers a chance to belong. Raven Santana visited the camp and heard the powerful stories of the young people whose lives have been changed there.
Nice. For most teens, summer means sleepaway camps, dorm room chats, and the freedom of independence. But for young people living with spinal cord injuries, that sense of freedom can feel impossibly far off until now.
I'm diagnosed a C4, C5 quadriplegic, and I'm really just working on daily activities like putting my shirt on, getting dressed in the mornings, brushing my teeth, which a lot of people take for granted, but it's the little things that really make a big difference in my life, that even if it's just putting my shirt on or like washing my hair this week or whatever it is, just those little accomplishments mean the biggest things to us. So
20-year-old Micah McLendon from Chapel Hill, Tennessee, is one of 9 participants in True Grit Camp, a unique sleepaway program in partnership with Rutgers University School of Health Professions. Set on the Rutgers New Brunswick campus, True Grit is more than a camp. It's rewriting the story of what life after injury can look like.
Now we're able to accept up to 12 participants, and the age range is between 16 and 21. And the kids are coming from all over the country because, like I mentioned, there's not really anything for them at this point besides us. So the cost is we charge a $50 registration fee, and there's no additional cost beyond that.
The program's founder, Cassandra Boyd, says the camp offers far more than just dorm keys and schedules. It offers a roadmap for life.
We interview everybody before they come. We do an evaluation, and we really learn what's meaningful to them, and that's how we schedule camp, and that's how we make our program. So if we have a kid who wants to try lacrosse again, we put lacrosse on our schedule. We do some things every day all together, like going to breakfast in the dining hall, and then we give them opportunities just to hang out and be on a college campus together and go to Starbucks. Then we do things like yoga, we do things like swimming. We give them opportunities to try new things. To be able to see these teens just light up again is everything to me.
Rutgers lecturer and program co-leader Kira McNair says what participants find here isn't just therapy, it's team support, a purpose, and a path forward.
They also really appreciated structure. A lot of them have a hard time refinding that structure post-injury, and a lot of things just look like, well, I go to therapy or I go to school, and that's kind of it. Whereas one of our participants, he used to be a football player, and he said, like, I felt like I was back on the team, right? I'm getting up in the morning, I have something to do, I have somewhere to be all day long, and I got my team with me. And that was really meaningful. So that was something that we wanted to bottle and keep.
For 18-year-olds Anthony Presto of upstate New York and Isaac Lima of Roselle Park, the camp delivered far more than just activities. It delivered hope.
So I used to be a cheerleader, and so while I was at cheer practice, I was doing some stunts and I fell and unfortunately suffered a spinal cord injury. So being here, it gave me like that push to say, oh, I can do it. I can go to a college, I can go to the classrooms.
I was diving through a pool tube and I ended up missing it and breaking my neck. I've only been injured for a year, and like 3 months ago, I wouldn't even go to the grocery store by myself. So this was like a really big step for me to be in contact with people and talk to people.
Looks like we got some eggs to load up.
True Grit's powerhouse team includes nurses, therapists, and peer mentors, some of whom have traveled this road themselves, like camp mentor Jashar Banks.
Can't just put on a different pair of shoes, to go running, right? We need $5,000 at least equipment to go and bike, right? We need equipment to do anything, really. So a camp like True Grit is awesome because we have those resources and we share that with others to borrow and use for the time being.
Whether it's learning a new sport, cooking with adaptive tools, or simply bonding over shared experiences, Boyd says True Grit Camp is determined to grow, empowering more young people to build strength, confidence, and the unshakable belief that their future is still full of possibility. For NJ Spotlight News, I'm Raven Santana.
Dreams of a scenic 9-mile-long greenway connecting Jersey City to Montclair and all the places in between took a big step forward earlier this week. Governor Murphy joined administration officials and local leaders for a groundbreaking on the project's first phase. Referred to as the Greenway, the plan is to transform a long-abandoned rail line into a state park, similar to Manhattan's popular High Line. Proponents of the Greenway believe it'll spark tourism and activity along its route. One section in Newark in particular will be a 1-mile stretch between Branch Brook Park and Broadway Avenue, and plans for that space include a performance stage, a playground, community garden, and more. Governor Murphy said at the groundbreaking on Tuesday that he expects the park to be transformative for Essex and Hudson counties.
And I think it will rival any, not just the High Line, any other park, particularly urban park like it anywhere in the nation. And it'll be particularly a game changer for the communities in both Essex and Hudson counties that will benefit enormously from this. And it will benefit, this is one of these things that will be benefiting folks many, many, many decades from now.
That's going to do it for us this week, but a reminder, you can download our podcast wherever you listen and watch us anytime by subscribing to the NJ Spotlight News YouTube channel. Plus, you can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky to stay up to date on all the state's big headlines. I'm Joanna Gagis for the entire team here at NJ Spotlight News. Thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday.
New Jersey Education Association, making public schools great for every child. RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together. New Jersey Realtors, the voice of real estate in New Jersey. More information is online at njrealtor.com. And Orston, committed to delivering clean, reliable, American-made energy.